on a lot of interventions in terms of fighting corruptions. The issue of establishing a specialized unit within the NPA, do you think that will go a long way in terms of prosecuting all the people implicated in the state capture allegations?
Well, I think it will not do anything, because just now there are people who have been arrested. But among those, we don't see politicians being taken to task. We're hoping that, when people were being taken to task, like the whistleblowers, there will be politicians as well who are implicated. I think there should be punitive measures taken as soon as possible, but that has not been done. Now, establishing units, councils, commissions, I don't think it will assist us. You see, at the moment, he was very sketchy and glossing over the issue. The issue of corruption is so endemic. As we speak now, Eskom and other entities are bankrupt because of corruption. So I don't think the president was serious about it.
Just on the pronouncement of reconfiguring government and government departments, it's going to be completed within this fifth administration for implementation under the sixth administration. How would you like the government departments to be reconfigured? What suggestions would you put as the party?
Well, for instance, environmental affairs and tourism must come together. Higher education and science and technology must come together, and other department, basic education, could come together with higher education too. You know, we said long time ago that the government was bloated, hence there was a need to put some departments together. We hope that they will be trimmed so that we don't have 42 budgets. We have a meaner government, and we will save the government fiscus. At the moment, our government is in debt, and the sooner we ensure that the government is meaner and smaller, not bloated, I think we'll save some fiscus there.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Nhlanhla Khubisa, the Chief Whip of the National Freedom Party, giving us his party's views on the State of the Nation address. For more reaction, I believe Manelisi is standing by.
Yes, thank you very much, Bulelane. I'm with the leader of the PAC, Mr. Nyanso. Mr. Nyanso, the president said quite a number of very important things. So would you agree that he has made the right noises this time around?
He has made right rhetoric. Rhetoric after rhetoric, same thing after same thing. Joblessness, landlessness. But they spoke about celebration, that we are celebrating after 25 years. But what are we going to celebrate? What Africans can celebrate if they still do not have land? As long as they don't have, we have nothing to celebrate. Now, we really see the part, for me it was not the State of the Nation per se, but the election manifesto of the ruling party. And we are saying people, as the elections are coming over, they must come and vote for PAC, because I think they are also tired of this rhetoric after rhetoric.
He talked very well about reconfiguring the government and resuscitating the state institutions such as NPA, SARS and so on. Do you agree with him?
I agree with him, but it's late for them. They are going to get to leave the government now. They are going to get out of the government. But they are going to be voted out of the government. It's late, it's right, but somebody else will do it. Hopefully PAC will do it. But really we need state institutions that are not party aligned. We need state institutions that are not going to be manipulated by the ruling party as they have been doing. As we can see now, the security states are in shambles. They have been used as political tools to deal with political enemies or political opponents. And we are all victims of that. But we hope that the coming next elections, the coming government will really mean what they say, and hopefully it will not be the ANC, but PAC.
Mr. Nyanso, thank you very much and good luck on your new government. That's Mr. Nyanso, the leader of the PAC. And it's back to you, Stephen.
Manelisi, thank you. Good evening once again. All right, lots of reaction coming through thick and fast here on the steps of the National Assembly tonight. Time to hear from the United Democratic Movement, their Member of Parliament in Mmusi Maimane. Mr. Maimane, good evening to you. So your reaction to the speech?
Well, the speech was a very good and comprehensive statement of intent from the President. But the problem is that it was too long, a laundry list of promises. I mean, we've had most of these things before, and the issue has always been the failure of the ANC to implement these plans. Look, I think from where I'm sitting, I think he was given a wrong theme for the speech, because if you look at the billboards outside, they are saying following up on the promises, and the president came today and made more promises instead of reporting on the promises that they've made in the past and whether they've been able to implement those. But the other thing where I think we should compliment the president on is his attempt to depoliticize the National Intelligence Agency, but to also say that it's going to be tough on corruption with all the changes, the institutional changes and the reconfigurations that are going to happen at the National Director of Public Prosecutions. But I think what is important from us, especially in the opposition, is that we want those people who looted state resources to be brought to book. We don't just want politicians, rather officials. We want politicians. You can't have the likes of Nomvula Nongonyane who contributed to or led to the demise of the Department of Water and Sanitation, who are allowed to still roam around as ministers of our departments. So it means now they need to start acting on politicians rather than just focusing on officials. But I think insofar as the economic plan, I think it's comprehensive, looking at intra-Africa trade and the opportunities that exist for South Africa there, and to say even globally what kind of issues can we champion, and improving trade and trying to stimulate economic growth. I think overall it was a good plan.
There's also going to be big changes at Eskom. Do you have a view on whether Eskom should be changed in the way it's going to be, almost broken up into three parts?
Well, we are against completely the privatization of Eskom, but I think what they need to do is to first table their plan. We want to scrutinize it and look at what it has in store for South Africa, and whether or not it would be able to make sure that it saves the fiscus of the country from the risks it faces currently because of Eskom.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Nkwankwa. I really do appreciate it. From the United Democratic Movement, Bulelani Philip has more.
All right, thank you so much, Stephen. Now joining me here on the steps of the National Assembly is the ANC's Treasurer General, Mr. Paul Mashatile. Mr. Mashatile, a comprehensive speech, but let's look at the issue that people are picking out. The ANC says it's committed to fighting corruption, yet some of their own MPs are implicated in some of these allegations. Why take that route?
Well, firstly, let me say we welcome the President's speech. It was very comprehensive. We ourselves as the ANC have addressed a lot of these issues in our manifesto that was launched this year in January, including the issue of corruption. I think if you listen to the President, he said action must take place. Where there's proof of wrongdoing and the NDPP, there should be no fear or favor. So we're not going to protect our MPs or ministers. If there is evidence, we are saying those institutions of state that have the role to prosecute, they must do so.
Shouldn't they step aside while those investigations and serious allegations against them are being investigated?
Well, sometimes really allegations can be proven otherwise. So I think once there are allegations, people can run away. They must face those allegations, but it's the responsibility of the institutions of state to act rather than, even if you say somebody step aside, but that's not dealing with the issue. If there are allegations, and as the President says, where there's evidence of wrongdoing, they must act.
Lastly, Mr. Mashatile, the proposal of unbundling Eskom, do you not foresee any clashes with the labor unions?
We will consult with them, and those discussions have already started. Within the ANC, as the alliance, we have been talking. One of the issues that the President emphasized is a just transition. Obviously, we don't want to suddenly create a problem where people lose their jobs and so on. So we will deal sensitively with these issues, but we must get Eskom right.
Right, thank you so much, ANC TG, Mr. Paul Mashatile, giving us the views of the ANC on the State of the Nation address. For more reaction, Manelisi is standing by.
Thank you very much, Bulelane. I'm with the Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, Professor Mamukete Pake. Prof, thank you very much for coming. The President touched on the issues of NSFAS and the violence and intimidation that is continuing in the high learning of institutions. Your comment on this?
I'm glad that the President mentioned universities, especially now. and highlighted some of the challenges that we're facing. And one of the things that the President mentioned that's useful is the fact that government is going to come to the party when it comes to residences, which is one of our biggest problems, because none of the universities has got enough beds for all the students that need. So I'm glad about the fact that he recognized the problem, he highlighted it, he challenged us, and he gave us some hope in terms of at least one of the problems to deal with.
And how is the registration going on in your institution, by the way?
I mean, we're finalizing orientation week. Registration is going on. It's going slow, but it's right there. I haven't checked the numbers yet as to where we are at today, but we're doing fine. I mean, I've been focusing on first years the past 2 weeks to make sure that they are welcome, they are all accommodated, and everything is going well.
And with NSFAS, is NSFAS administering the process quite well?
Well, NSFAS remains a challenge. I mean, the President explained, of course, to anyone who doesn't understand that from 2018, the government started considering a new form of NSFAS in terms of covering students whose total family income is 350,000 rands. Before then, it only went up to covered people up to 122,000 rands. And those students are still in the system, and those students need the top up, and universities have to top up, but it's tough to get universities to top up in the context of salary demands and all other demands that we need to meet as universities. So it is a tough time in terms of NSFAS. We're going on to 2019, the second year of implementation. We're hoping for sustainability. And of course, the President, as he said, the 5 years are key. We'll see how the system works. But it worked well in 2018 in terms of the amount promised. The timing of the delivery was a problem. And so some universities struggle to cover up for the students whilst we are waiting for the money to come in.
Prof, thank you very much for your time and good luck with the registration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's Vice-Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, Professor Mmusi Maimane. And it's back to you, Stephen.
Manalisi, thank you. Good evening once again. Standing next to me now is the Minister of
SONA 2019. Let's cross back live to continue to give you some political opposition reaction.
Digital communication, all a big part of that.
We're very excited actually that the President has made his speech to focus on the digital transformation, especially the fact that he has finally appointed the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission, which seeks to help us as South Africa to speak on one voice when we talk about the matters of Fourth Industrial Revolution. That means even you, SABC, you've got to transform how you do things, but most importantly, having a country that has a coordinated plan, a dialogue that is going to be created, and therefore the coordinated effort that will make sure that South Africans are ready to exploit the spoils that will be presented by the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And of course, it means we've got to do everything to try to save the jobs by empowering or upskilling those that are already in the jobs. But at the same time, we address it at a lower level by introducing coding, as he has mentioned, at the young level, at the early stages, to make sure that they grow up innovative and therefore they'll be able to help South Africa move forward.
You talk about the SABC, you talk about empowering people so they don't lose their jobs. I presume you're very pleased that no retrenchments are going to happen. Would you like that to be permanent, that no retrenchments happen at the SABC, finished and clear?
Well, I wouldn't want to see any retrenchments anywhere. But of course, we've got to be realistic at times and look into the circumstances that we are faced with and also attend to the issues that at times were done illegally without punishing anyone. And therefore, yes, as a member of a caring government, we don't want to see anyone losing jobs. That is why we are committed in upskilling others, in redirecting people at jobs. I mentioned earlier that President spoke about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which means there's a need for us to drive communication. Right now, we don't have any stations at the provincial
Minister,
level.
I'm just going to ask you to step out the way of the car before it runs you over. I'm so sorry, but do stay in the shot. Please finish your answer.
Right now, we don't have the footages of the provinces because they're not covered. SABC is only at national. How do we make sure that we utilize the talent and the skill that we have already with the existing personnel to make sure we build that capacity both at provincial and local level? Therefore, those are the options that we are looking at. Before we say go home, but what is it that we can do with you to make sure that that the investment that we have put in you indeed is realized by the country.
I have to ask, we don't yet know if the SABC is going to be bailed out and if I'm going to be paid at the end of March.
You've got to wait for the Minister of Finance, but definitely SABC is in our hearts and a priority. The people of this country deserve to get the information that they get from SABC, but most importantly, this is the only public broadcaster that we have. Therefore, we are left with no choice but do everything in our power to make sure that SABC functions properly.
I'll sleep better tonight. Minister, thank you so much. Do appreciate the time. Thank you. That's the Minister of Communications, Stella Ndabani-Abrahams. I'm going to invite the President of COSATU, if I may, Zingiswa Losi, for a moment. Minister, thank you so much. I have to ask, I mean, obviously the first question is about Eskom. It looks like big changes. I don't think you're going to be that happy.
Thank you, Stephen. Look, of course, the President pronounced in terms of the unbundling of Eskom. It is one thing that we are not happy with. But it's a decision that has been taken. But what we should be looking forward to is what the President has said in terms of a proper consultation for all of us as stakeholders to understand what does unbundling of Eskom mean. Because for anything that government has to do in relation to Eskom in any of the SOEs is to ensure that it does not result to job losses, particularly job losses with regards to low-end workers. So we are looking forward to a proper consultation, and we hope that there is no end game that has already been decided, and consultation will just be a process to tick the box. So we are looking forward to a proper consultation. We all agree that Eskom is in trouble. We all agree that Eskom is a very important entity of government. And for us to grow the economy, we really need to ensure that we have enough electricity. But that cannot be at an expense of workers, because also, Stephen, it will be a contradiction to what the President has said in relation to the outcomes of the Job Summit. So it cannot be our government that will say that in order for us to save this entity, we must do what we said we are not going to do in terms of moratorium in relation to government on job losses. So we're looking forward to a proper consultation. We hope that it will be a meaningful one, where all of us, we will look into the state of Eskom, but agree on how we shall all march forward.
Ma'am, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Zingiswa Losi, of course, is the President of COSATU. Bulelani Philip is standing by.
Both Bulelani Philip as well as Stephen Curtis outside the National Assembly for SABC News. We continue to give you a reaction post-SONA 2019 after the break.
Thing that I really liked is he spoke about opening technical colleges. You know, if government allowed technical colleges to carry on when they took over in 1994, we would not be having as many matriculants. Will not sit in the street and say we can't find jobs. They will be using their hands and the skills they acquired in the technical colleges in order to make a living for themselves and to start their own businesses. That's a positive thing. And on the issue of corruption, he has a challenge. As you know, that there are 5 governments, there are 5 countries who challenged him on the issue of corruption and said if he does not deal decisively with corruption, then investment would not come. So we believe that it is important for him to show the world that he's serious in uprooting corruption by dealing decisively with all those who have been pointed out as being involved in corruption. But we also are interested in seeing whether he's going to touch cabinet ministers in his cabinet. There are a number of cabinet ministers who have been identified as participants in corruption. So we want to know if the president is only going to throw officials under the bus or whether he's going to deal with his own cabinet ministers. If he does that, he'll be sending a clear and good message to the international community that South Africa is ready for investments. Because as you know, investors don't want to bring their investments into a country where they will be looted by people they know are looters. That's why it's important for the president to deal decisively with those who are involved in corruption, particularly those who are members of parliament and also cabinet ministers. Well, the other things that obviously we are not very happy about. The issue of drugs. He does not have a strategy of eradicating drugs, and he does not talk about removing drugs from society. Now, the ACDP also obviously is going to speak about that when we respond how we believe we need to deal with drug dealers in society to ensure that our children are protected from drugs. As you know that Nyaupe, for example, is messing up the minds and the brains of our young people. We want to see drugs removed from society, and there's a way of doing that. He also spoke about gangsters, the problem with gangsterism. Gangsters, we believe, should be stopped in South Africa. We should make a law that outlaw gang membership. If you do that, then you don't have a problem of gangsterism. There are people who are shot by stray bullets because of the gangs that are fighting among themselves. That's why we believe that he needs to have a better strategy. Rather than control gangsters, they must be stopped from operating in a country so that our streets can be safe and children who want to go to school can go without any fear that they will be challenged.
Reverend Kenneth Meshwe, touching on a lot of things there. That's the leader of the ACDP. Of course, touching on the issue of a social system that needs to be tidied up. For more reaction, Manelisi is standing by.
Thank you very much, Bulelane. After all the political talk and education and so on, we are now moving to healthy lifestyles. And I'm with here the Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Minister, on issues affecting your department, the President said quite a number of things. Your comment?
Well, he summarized them. He summarized them by announcing the issue of universal health coverage, which we call NHI, that it is the biggest reform the healthcare system has ever undertaken. It summarizes all the things we want to do about health, and it's even mentioned that to support that, the president himself has established a war room in the presidency, whose job will be to put up a program. We actually have that program to make sure that the program to improve each and every health facility in the country is undertaken from the war room.
We've been talking about this NHI for quite some time, Minister. Now, when is it coming?
Oh yes, indeed, it's quite some time, but I want to warn you, we are not the only country. This is not just a small reform. It's a big revolution. It's a seismic change. And many countries that had to implement this spoke about it for a long time. You are changing the manner in which society has been running its health system for centuries, not for decades. And it's not something that can happen overnight. Many people are claiming or believe that we've been discussing this for the past 10 years. Go back in history, it's not 10 years. The first discussion about this type of thing started in 1928. Yes, it continued with the College Commission. It continued into 1944. It continued into 1955, if you look at the Freedom Charter, or even in 1953, the African claims. You know, if you look at all those things, it was a movement to say we need a healthcare system that is accessible to everybody regardless of their socio-economic status. It's not something that started now. And if you look at the whole world, the United Nations only adopted it as one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. But if you look at the World Health Organization, as far back as 1978, that's 41 years ago, at the conference, Primary Healthcare Conference in Alma Ata, they end up with a slogan called Health for All. By the way, 2000, they were believing in 1978 that by 2000, we should have achieved a situation around the world where there's health care for all people, individuals of the world. So it's not something that is starting now, as people are claiming, something that has been long-standing, but because of its complexity and the fact that it's something that is seismic change. You don't just wake up and do it by tomorrow.
And just before I let you go, just briefly, Minister, are our health facilities ready for this seismic change, as you put it?
If you read the white paper or the bill, the NHI bill, is mentioning steps to make the healthcare facilities to get ready. And the president also mentioned the war room. But these things are not mutually exclusive. There is this idea that you can sit back, improve the healthcare system, and when it's fully improved, you implement NHI. Improving the health system is ongoing forever. There's no stage of your life anywhere in the world in which you can ever say the health system is improved, is ready. The British implemented NHS, their universal health coverage, in 1948. Up to today, they are still busy improving it. They are still making changes. They are still, they are changing, they are coming with policies for the past 70 years. If they waited then and said, let's improve the healthcare system, even today, they'll still be busy improving it. So it's a very wrong concept to believe you can stand back and say, I'm improving this, then do something later. It's like our democracy in 1994, where we're ready for it. There are quite a number of people who claim that we're not ready for democracy, we need to do this first. If by 1994 we could have stood at corners and say, let's improve the livelihood of our people first before we come with democracy, even today we would not have had it. The last example, every year I increase the number of people who are on ARVs. Every year. We are told that no, the health system is not ready for them. Wait a bit, improve it and add more people, there's going to be suffering. In 2009, we had only 923,000 people on ARVs. Today is 4.4 million. What will have happened if I said, no, let's wait first to improve the healthcare system, the drug supply and all that, before we put these people on treatment? How many people will have died while we are waiting for the improvement? I don't understand that argument. The things are not mutually exclusive. They can be done simultaneously. And that's what the whole world has been doing.
Thank you very much, Minister of Health, Aaron Motsoaledi, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Is back to you, Stevie.
Manalisi, thanks very much indeed. I'm joined now by the Minister for Basic Education, Angie Motshekga. Minister, good evening to you. Obviously, a lot of talk about education and how education is going to change. What do you think that means for your portfolio? Are we going to see education in schools actually changing in the next 4 to 5 years?
No, it should actually. What has been, these were some of the weak links in the system of very poor foundations of learning, and then it was catching up with us later in the system. And if we really get this right, which we have been working on over a long period of time, that's why he did say that we're ready to, for the 2 years, we've got programs in place to train more teachers, to roll out resources. For me, that's the answer to strengthening the work that we're doing. In terms of our system is fragile, and half the time we have to get more support. And if we can't get it right, the foundations will end up in this crisis mode that we find ourselves in. So it's very important that the country invests in early foundations of learning.
A lot of talk about technological change, courses in coding at schools. Do you really think we're going to see coding being taught in schools, and not just urban schools, but schools in rural areas as well in the near future?
No, we've been piloting the past 2 years. We're ready because we had to first be sure about the curriculum, teacher training, want the resources. So we piloted in 100 schools, and we think we've learned enough lessons to phase it in, because again, it's going to be a question of resources, of skills of teachers. So we're working with universities, we're working with the private sector, so we have lots of support from outside government of people who've got even stronger skills to get this work. So I'm also comfortable that the pilot can be scaled up incrementally, not overnight.
And teaching using technology, my children are being taught in the same way I was, and I was taught in the same way my parents were. In other words, our children are learning, with a blackboard in the same way that their grandparents did. We're going to have tablets and things like that. Do you think it's really going to make a difference?
No, we are part of an international study, and we keep on warning ourselves and everybody else to say you can't have a teacherless classroom, you can't have a paperless classroom. We need a hybrid of the systems, and if you've got good teachers, good resources, it still is the best. There's enough evidence that we've picked up from the private school, but internationally, that tablets are not, or your ICTs are not your silver bullet. Your child can still have the best that you had under the same systems. What for me is very important about tablets is to close the deficits we have in the system. We have to teach kids who are deaf. We don't have trained teachers. So we're going to use ICTs for deficits, but we're not going to replace the book, the teacher, and the chalkboard. They're still going to be there.
Minister, thank you so much for your time tonight. I really do appreciate it. Minister Angie Motshekga, of course, the Minister of Basic Education. I'm going to invite now the CEO of Eskom, Phakamani Khadebe, to join us. So thank you very much indeed. Your parastatal featured a lot in the speech tonight. Lots of changes coming. How would you explain the changes? How do you think Eskom is going to change?
I think what the President announced today provides Eskom with the opportunity to effect the changes. The cost-cutting mechanism which you highlighted is important. It's something we've been working on. The tariffs, increasing in tariffs, or tariffs that are reflective of Eskom's cost is very, very important. But these two things only talk about the cost and revenue side of business. The third you highlighted, which will ensure the sustainability of business, is the optimization of the balance sheet. That is, government will help us on the optimization of the balance sheet. In simple terms, it means that government is going to help Eskom improve.
There are a lot of people who are going to see what was announced tonight as some sort of partial privatization of Eskom. I know that in a way those decisions are made, how do I put this, by people in cabinet perhaps, or politically rather than yourself. How would you describe it then? Is it a partial privatization? Is it something else? Do we have to wait a little longer to see?
No, but the President also stated that the assets, key assets of government will not be sold. So that talks about generation, transmission and distribution. It won't be sold. He made a commitment. What he's trying to do is just to ensure efficiencies. And there's a statement he said, which is very, very critical and important. He indicated that we need to deal with this. That's a pain we have to go through, because if we don't deal with this pain right now, in future it will even be worse. We are beginning to see this. Eskom is struggling to access the market. The debt is bigger. Our earnings, the income we're making in operations, is not sufficient for us to service our debt. So we are at a debt cliff, and this is intended to deal with all those issues to ensure that the supply of electricity is guaranteed and is safeguarded in South Africa.
So thank you very much indeed for your time. Phakamani Khadebe, of course, is the CEO of Eskom. Bulelani, back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Stephen. We're doing more reactions. Now joining me is former Cape Town Mayor Patricia de Lille, who's just formed a new political party, Good. For you, Madam de Lille, is there anything good coming out of this speech?
I've listened very attentively. This president said many things. Some of them inspiring, some of them good, some that we've heard before. But I could not help thinking that there's such a disconnect between what he's speaking about. It's almost as if it's a different country from what we know the reality on the ground is. So we hear President speaking about a lot of new plans. Now, also, what happened to the old plans? Why were they not implemented? My advice to President is that this time around, he must take every one of his new plans, give it to a minister with clear key performance areas of when to start and when to end. We can't, again, just give plans to our people. But I'm very happy about the investigative powers to the NDPP, because the Scorpions used to have it, but of course they killed off the Scorpions. And if the new NDPP can get those powers, we can see that we can deal with prosecution of corruption more decisively. Other one I'm happy about is the ECD, that, early childhood development become compulsory for all children. It's now with basic education. We will see an investment in that in the results of our matriculants by just teaching children from early childhood.
All right, Ms. de Lille, thank you so much for your time, giving us her views on the early childhood development centers. On my right, I'm going to be speaking to a member of the PAC. Well, the PAC is having its own troubles, but from a PAC perspective, the issue of land expropriation is still on the table. Whether the constitutional amendment will be done before the rise of the 5th Parliament will be done is neither here or there. Your view on the pronouncements?
To be honest with you, as the PAC, there was no substance. in the speech that was made by the president of the country. The speech was just full of empty promises. The fact that the land issue was a rhetoric to almost everybody last year, I could not believe it that today the president was not able at least to tell us exactly what is going to happen, more especially about the change of Section 25. Although in the PAC we are not calling for expropriation, we are just calling for the return of land back to its rightful owners. But the issue of expropriation, because as far as we understand, you cannot expropriate from something that belongs to you. I mean, it does not make sense. And the issue of the public entities, I know that he spoke about the new model. In the past, they used to speak about the restructuring, and at the same, and I don't understand even what he means by that. But we are hoping, as the party, that he is not thinking about privatizing Eskom, because we know that capital is very cruel, more especially when it comes to, they only focus on as you know, that they focus on profits, not in creating jobs. And all these public entities, as far as we're concerned as the PAC, is that they are there to make sure that at least we do not decrease or increase, the levels of unemployment.
Mr. Lutando Mbide, sorry, because of time, we're going to have to leave it at that. That was Mr. Lutando Mbinda from the PAC. For more reaction, we cross to Manelisi on the other side.
Thank you very much, Bulelane. I'm joined now by the first Secretary General of the SACP, Mr. Suli Mapaila. Mr. Mapaila, just broadly on what the President said today, what's your take?
It was a long speech, but precise in concrete action points about how to turn around the economy to create employment for majority of our people and to provide services, but also a good lesson on accountability. The President was able to elaborate clearly on the previous State of the Nation address on areas that he committed himself. He gave a full report about various presidential-led initiatives, or whether it was on investment, on the health summit, and all of those are now becoming action point for this year forecast. And we think that it was a good speech, and we think government can actually take a cue from this kind of leadership going forward. And I think many other areas of intervention, the rollout of the NHI, the creation of a new housing bank, all of those are very important interventions. The creation of a special investigative unit within the NDPP to focus on the outcomes of various state commissions, including the State Capture Commission. It's very important because it will be much more focused and can overload the work of the existing work of the NDPP or the NPA as a whole. We welcome all of those areas and many other areas that you had focused on. The focus on the question of Eskom and state-owned enterprises, forthright interventions, and the call for people to pay for services. We welcome that as well. We support that. We think all of us must work together to make our country work.
So let me hear you correctly here. So you support the splitting of Eskom to make it more efficient and effective?
Yes, as long as it's still owned by the government, we welcome that. Of course, it will attract more investment in the various areas of divisions. And he has also made an important call that Eskom should itself participate in the renewable space rather than be the procurer of the renewable space, because it does have the capacity to enter into that particular field and make investment and actually lead in that particular space given its capacity. So all of those are welcome, because this provides a new innovation and new thinking in how the government must do things.
And very lastly, Mr. Mapaila, he talked about an additional 275,000 jobs if all these plans are put in action. You accept that, obviously?
That one was actually tabled as part of the commitment from the Presidential Job Summit. He had indicated here that the possibility to multiply that by almost 5 And if that is possible going forward, we'll really appreciate that, because one of the worst crises facing our country is a question of jobs. And if you get our people working and producing, being productive, that's the most important thing. And I think that the action plan that he outlined today, he has created possibility on how to turn around a government that was becoming lethargic, and state-owned enterprises, the interventions that have been made to make them more functional and create possibility for our country to work. That is very much welcome, and we are looking forward to that, and we are ready even for the elections campaign, and ensuring that on the 8th of May all South Africans can bring back this government to continue the transformation agenda of our society.
Mr. Mapaila, thank you very much. That was the first Secretary General of the SACP, Mr. Soli Mapaila, and we continue with our broadcast. And Stevie?
Yeah, Manalisi, no end to the reaction here tonight. Still plenty to come, I suspect. Lots of discussion, I'm sure, through the weekend of the President's speech. We're joined now by the President of the Black Management Forum, Andile Nomlala. Mr. Nomlala, good evening to you. Your reaction to the speech? The speech perhaps could be described as looking to the future?
Evening, Stephen. And I think, look, South Africa is back to work. That's what I can tell you. The speech was very inspiring, very positive. In fact, I don't even want to call it a speech. It was a proper, well-articulated business plan. All we need to do as South Africans now is to keep each other accountable, and as BMF is to make sure that we support the programs and the initiatives that the President has mentioned. I liked 3 particular issues that he has raised. The issue of education, the quality of it, the improvement of the standards of that education, the issue of the infrastructure development, or the focus on productive sectors of our economy, where our economy can produce more, create jobs, the revitalization of the old Bantustan industrial hubs. That's another thing. And obviously, for everybody's lips, the practical steps to curb corruption. So out of those, out of the many things that he has said in the speech, I think President Cyril is very clear about where we are going. He has touched on the plans that we need to put, and he has touched on the plans of the future. The 4th Industrial Revolution Commission that he has appointed, it secures us into a stake to the possibilities of what the world and the new future is coming. So I'm very particularly pleased, and as BMF we are pledging our support. We will be there. I've sent a letter to him. We will meet soon, and we will look at detailed programs that black professionals in particular in the country can supplement the work and the efficiencies of the state by bringing credible and capable professionals to help work with him.
It's one thing to say it's a good business plan, but this is politics. Politics is a lot more complicated than business, surely. The question really is about trying to get different constituencies in different parts of the country, in different places economically, to agree. Isn't that actually the hard part?
Look, I agree with you. Politics can be very complicated and complex, but the reality is that we have learned in the recent past that whoever put plans in place, we will keep them accountable. Hence, I'm saying we must have a level of accountability. But what is important is that the thinking, what I'm impressed about is that the thinking is at the right space, and I think by virtue of his inclination into his past of being in business, I think implementation would be a lot more better than in the past. And the support that he has from business in particular, I have engaged Chamber of Mines CEO, I've engaged Busa leadership, I've engaged even BBC President Sandile. Everybody is in support. The positivity that comes with the energy and the success that we think South Africa can get is what will take us somewhere. And he had declared even inside that it's not about whether or not you are on the sidelines. You have to start. The failures are possible, we can accept them, but we will pick up as we go along. We must start, we must create a sustainable and a future that has prospects for our children and those that comes after us.
Obviously, one of the big stories of the night is about Eskom. We spoke to the Eskom CEO a few moments ago, Phakamani Khadebe. He was suggesting it's not really a privatization in any way. Do you think they go far enough?
Look, the Eskom matter, I actually participated as BMF in the business submission from Busa. There's something has to be done. The EBITDA of Eskom to date can't even pay interest. it's a crisis situation, and the domino effect, if Eskom is allowed to fail, it would be crippling into the economy. The debt that can be recalled, the fiscus would never be able to cover and plug that hole. So I think, from my perspective, that it's a business a program, well-vested way where you disintegrate so that you can see the cost centers and you can see where the investors who are interested in coming into Eskom are able to plug their money. If you keep it as a big animal that is failing, you might not be able to see where are the problems exactly, and people can't just trust into putting money into a bottomless pit. So separating production, transmission, and sales, or the selling point is quite critical, and is even overemphasized that if you then disintegrate them as he did, you'll be able, perhaps, particularly at the tail end where you are selling the electricity, to be able to go to Soweto and the other areas where people are not necessarily paying interest, paying for their electricity, municipalities and other places. So maybe the business focus, I don't think there's privatization as things stand, and I don't think it's a complete anti move to even invite private sector players at a minority stake, but private sector players would not invest in something that they can't realize returns on. So the plan is proper. He has to obviously put it through legislation and make sure that we implement it quicker.
Andile Nomlala, thanks very much indeed, the president of the Black Management Forum. Bulelani standing by once again. Bulelani, who you got?
Well, thanks so much, Stephen. Once again, I'm seeing that a lot of people are ventilating their views. Now, joining me for reaction is a member of the African Independent Congress, Mr. Lulama Njaisa. Does this program announced by the president take us on a path of growth and job creation?
Yeah, he's promising a lot, because now he did speak about the way how to grow economy of this country. But I was still expecting a lot of him. For instance, I was just expecting now how he's going to close the gap between the public schools and the private schools. And again, when he started off his speech, he called for peace and unity in our diversity. Then this reminded me of the issue of racism that is happening in our schools. Then I thought perhaps now he would just give us the way how to address this issue, because it is happening in the so-called former Model C school. Again, I did talk about the issue of infrastructure, whereas he said that there's a lot that is being invested in infrastructure, but we want to see things happening, because all these promises that are being made sometimes are never implemented. So this time around, because we want to see this being implemented. Of course, the president is a very good person now who's always making good speeches. But now we're looking forward to whether this is going to be implemented or not. He was always saying, now watch the space. We've long been watching the space. Then want to see the things happening now. Of course, it did touch on the issue of unemployment. But still now, this is not coming directly on the people on the ground, because most of the people are not employed, more especially youth, so they don't see this. So it is just something now that is just like a story that they're having a lot of job opportunities, because even today they are going up and down looking for employment. So now these things now should happen. Of course, it was more or less part of the campaign, that is ANC manifesto, because most of the things that are said now just what is being said in their manifesto. Of course,
Mr. Lulama Njaisa, unfortunately, sorry for that. Because of time, we're going to have to creep closer to wrapping the show up. Manelisi, I believe you're standing by with the last guest for the night.
Yes, Bulelane, thank you very much. I am indeed coming closer to home now with the Secretary General of the Communication Workers Union, Mr. Shabalala. Mr. Shabalala, the President talked about increasing jobs rather than decreasing them. And your sector in particular has been marred by the losses of jobs, as the SABC also threatened at one stage to fire some people. What's your take generally on his speech?
Okay, generally on his speech, there was a number of positive things, particularly when he spoke very tough on corruption and the intervention on the SOEs. But as well, we must look at other areas that we have to strongly criticize. For example, the issue of pit toilets in the schools has been spoke about in 2007 through Thabo Mbeki, and he gave 3 years, and we are still talking about it today. The question of creating jobs, or we double the jobs, it cannot happen under what we talk about the strategic intervention. We know what is have done at Telkom, those strategic partnerships. So we think that is not the right way or the right path to move towards to. But we think that on the question of eroding corruption in the SOE can assist a great deal in terms of creating jobs in that space. And also he made emphasis around the 4th Industrial Revolution and the digitalization of broadcasting in its essence.
Mr. Chabalala, thank you very much for your views, and good luck. And now we are wrapping up, and I am now taking you back to Steve and Bulelani.
All right, thank you so much, Manelisi. We are here now nearly to wrap up this special live broadcast. Stephen, it's been a busy day, I guess.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think there's several things and several sort of takeaway points. Oh, Manelisi, there you are. Several takeaway points, I think. I mean, firstly, obviously, I think Eskom is the thing that people are going to be talking about tomorrow. There's going to be talk about education. There'll be talk also about the economy and how all of these things are going to change. I don't know about the reaction that you've heard. A lot of the opposition party leaders seem to be saying the promises are great, it's about action. I mean, that is to an extent what opposition leaders do. You expect them to say that. I think there will also be questions about particularly the National Prosecuting Authority. How was that line? Watch this space. I think that's going to be very interesting to go forward. What did you make of it?
Of course. I mean, he seemed to be meaning business, actually, because if you remember, Steve, people have been asking that there are all these commissions, but when is the action? Because people want to see people going to jail. Because I think that even political parties have been talking to. Julius Malema says that there's enough evidence to take people to jail. So, I mean, that sentence you just spoken about, watch this space. I think we need to watch this space, really.
I wouldn't be surprised, Bulelani, I mean, your view on this. I mean, Eskom, the unions, I mean, I spoke to Zingiswa Losi, you might have been able to hear it in your ear. I did not get the feeling she was particularly happy, although Pakamani Khadeba also is very careful to say it's not privatization.
Well, I suppose it's early days, and I mean, I also spoke to the TG of the ANC, Mr. Paul Mashatile, basically just to check whether making this decision, have they considered its implication when it comes to the labor relations? Because one of those issues is that if the relations break down, therefore Eskom will also still find themselves in a very difficult position. So I guess it's going to be some time before we see the actual proposals that will be brought on the table, as well as how labor is going to respond to those proposals.
Should we talk about tone just for a moment? I mean, there are polls out this week suggesting that, you know, so many South Africans feel the country's going in the wrong direction, and yet the president's polling numbers are very, very high. Manelisi, do you think that there was a suggestion perhaps of leadership coming from this? I mean, do you think that that's going to reassure? I mean, obviously we'll have to wait until the 8th of May to know for sure, but what voters might be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, Stephen, he gave some positive, sound bites there. I'm thinking particularly about something we didn't stress too much, about the discovery of oil and gas in Mosselbaai. I mean, that could be a game changer in that area. I know for a fact that Petro SA, which is operating there, which is having plants in Mosselbaai, it's the biggest employer of the people there. The discovery of this gas and oil reserves in Otanikwa, can be a real game changer and can create jobs. That can at least give some hope going to May the 8th. And if the ANC get its act together, I'm sure that there are lots of positive spin-offs that came out of this.
They're switching off the lights around us, gentlemen. I think they're trying to tell us something.
Yeah, well, it's the end of the night of that special broadcast of the State of the Nation address for 2019. My name is Bulelani Philip.
I'm Stephen Curtis.
And I'm Manelisi Tubase.
Thank you so much for watching.
Good night.